Hey everybody, Dave here with another candidate for Game of the Year. We're reaching back to March for this one, and honestly, I wasn't even sure Horizon Zero Dawn came out this year. It was that long ago. There was so much in this game to recommend it. By no means perfect, but good enough that I had to go back and watch old gameplay videos and listen to past episodes of the podcast to remind me what flaws the game possessed, because in sitting down to write the script for this video, I honestly couldn't remember. Horizon Zero Dawn plays like a lot of Far Cry games in that its open world layout and various game mechanics mirror those tropes found in every Far Cry game. In fact, it feels a lot like Far Cry Primal if someone took everything terrible about that game and replaced it with something awesome. Far Cry Primal felt like someone said, "Let's make another Far Cry game," and someone else said, "Yeah, but how is this one going to be different? What if it were about cavemen?" Then the dev meeting ended there, they all high-fived and went out for hookers and blow. By contrast, Horizon Zero Dawn feels like the same thing happened, but instead of quitting at cavemen and getting high, they kept working to create a game that actually had some thought put into it. The visual style is amazing, full of primitive weapons and armor made from very high-tech parts. You can really imagine each component of a piece of armor or weaponry as part of something much larger that was then repurposed by the primitive civilizations in the game. And while the whole robot dinosaur thing seems like the primary motivation was someone thought it would be really cool, and it is, the plot goes out of its way to justify the existence of massive robots and the strangely ethnically diverse tribes, and it does so in such a way as to make it thoroughly believable. On the face of it, the idea of high-tech monsters in a world full of people who look like they only worked out how to bang the rocks together a few generations back seems absurd. In addition, any primitive culture would be expected to break down along racial lines, it being the easiest way of delineating a clear us and them. But as the plot unfolds and the truth about mankind's history is revealed, it's all completely justified within context. In addition, there are themes presented in some very gendered ways, with the masculine Ares representing death, destruction, evil, etc., and the feminine Gaia representing life, survival, goodness, and so on. And thematically, this carries on throughout the game. The more peaceful tribes are matriarchal, while the more warlike ones are male-dominant, to the point where I'm fairly certain that I didn't run into a single human enemy that was a woman. The ancient architect planning to save mankind is a woman, and the one who goes mad and screws it up, killing everyone, is a man. But I never felt like any of it was really heavy-handed. The whole thing plays out in the background and is never really commented on by any of the characters, leaving the player to take note or ignore this element. No one bangs on about the feminine versus the masculine or says anything like, "Oh, woman wants to be in the hunter trials? Ha! I'm clearly being set up as an antagonist character." In fact, I'm racking my brain to remember a time when anyone brought up Aloy's gender to begin with. Everyone dumps on her for being a motherless outcast, but not for being a woman. It's a refreshing change from an industry that seems to think if there isn't a moment in the game where someone explains what the underlying theme is all about, then no one will get it. If you need an example of what I'm talking about, look at how every Assassin's Creed game won't shut up about the importance of freedom. In addition, it was nice not having to deal with a romantic subplot in this game. Invariably, every time Aloy met a male supporting character, I sat back and waited for them to start hitting on her and set me up to have to run a bunch of side quests for various NPCs to decide which one I was going to wind up with, BioWare style. And there were a few occasions where I thought that's exactly where things were going, and then they didn't, and I was shocked. The conversation went off in a completely different direction, and none of the characters ever brought it up. I kept waiting for every nice guy in the game to start trying to win over Aloy. Yes, I know my heteronormativity is showing, but it's just what I was expecting. I know it doesn't always have to be that way. To be fair, my Dragon Age 3 character was gay, mostly because Dorian was the only support character worth a damn outside of Varric. Well, except Sarah, but she was gay and my character was a guy, so that was a non-starter. In retrospect, I guess that makes my Inquisitor bi, and okay, this is sounding a little too much like the "I have a black friend" defense. What was I talking about? Then there's the way the game develops. We start out with Aloy wanting to learn where she came from, and then her focus broadens to encompass the salvation of humanity. The evolution mirrors the way the player starts out in a small area through exploration, comes to see the whole of the world they're playing in, and again, at no point does Aloy stop and start monologuing about this to the player. It's just a thing that sits there in the background to be noticed and appreciated or ignored. You can enjoy the game on its surface level of being an awesome Far Cry-style open-world experience, or you can see the deeper thematic and narrative structure that are generally not present in most AAA games today. All of this wrapped up in a warm, fuzzy blanket of some amazing voice acting. There's the awkward line here and there, the odd flat reading, but it's due in large part to how good so much of the voice acting is that the middling lines stand out so much. In addition, you have a cast of supporting characters that have enough personality and are sufficiently differentiated in their presentation and development as individuals that I found myself genuinely caring about them, even though I know they're going to die. That's also one of the problems I had with the game. Aloy's surrogate father, Rost, is so kind, likable, and caring, he might as well have a tattoo on his head saying, "I'm going to die." That or be played by Sean Bean. Though, honestly, if I were casting the movie, I'd push for Dave Bautista for the role. That said, I hope they never make a movie out of this. Those things never go well. If you're lucky, they can go awesomely bad, but mostly just no. No. Now, it's going to sound like I'm nitpicking, and there's a reason for that. In several places, I am. I feel like I have to, or I'm not going to have enough negatives to talk about here to feel like I've offered a balanced picture of this game. I've praised the game for its thematic restraint, but something does have to be said for the names. Aloy and Rost are a little too close to Alloy and Rust to not feel heavy-handed. She's a combination of things and he's old, I get it. Then there's Project Zero Dawn, which is a terrible name on its own. In the context of the project's goals, it's even worse. It sounds like a name someone got by throwing a bunch of magnetic poetry at a fridge and picking two things that stuck close together, or by asking Square Enix to name it. There were also a lot of elements of the game I never messed with, and I occasionally felt more than a little guilty about that. In the same way I never did a lot of riding, I also didn't really use the vast array of weaponry the game offered. Again, maybe it's just me, and perhaps other people had different playstyles that lended themselves well to using the Tripcaster, but outside of the bow and the spear, I found most of my kit to be utterly useless, proving either unsuited to stealth or too slow for active combat, and any traps I set up ultimately saw the various creatures simply wandering around them like they were hung up with caution tape and bore a big sign saying "Mind the Gap" in large friendly letters. Then there were the climbing sections, and while the game did a pretty good job of marking what I could and could not climb on, there were a lot of obstacles that seemed like they should be climbable but weren't for arbitrary reasons, or objects I had to jump over despite them being low enough that they hardly came up to Aloy's mid-shin. There was also the odd section of Bethesda-style mountaineering to get up inclines that should have been walkable. The tropes the game fell back on are pretty well worn. Craft things using loot drops, collect plants for additional crafting opportunities. Most of the explicit challenges I encountered fell into the usual kill this creature with this weapon a designated number of times. And then there's the fact that it was a PS4 exclusive, and really, fuck exclusives. Aloy's childhood was a bit annoying to play through, in that you're a child, which by definition means you're limited in what you can do. It's become a way for lazy writers to establish backstory for their character and give the player a tutorial on basic controls. That said, in this case, it sets the stage nicely for future events, establishing a relationship between Aloy, Rost, and the rest of the community, as opposed to other games where it is literally serving no other function than to familiarize the player with basic movement, and perhaps the most token of gestures a character motivation. I'm looking directly at you, Assassin's Creed Unity. So maybe this one isn't a fault in the game so much as me being burnt out on such game sections. I also feel the need to point out the mouth movement, of which there was little. It's like the whole cast was made up of failed ventriloquists. Either that or the minimal mouth movement was meant to cover up any issues with getting the dialogue and animation to match up. The whole thing left me feeling like I was teetering over the edge of the uncanny valley. This game did so much so well that this constituted, for me at least, a very glaring oversight. In addition, the tribal color coding got on my nerves. Aloy is from the Nora, or the Blue Rope tribe, not to be confused with the Oseram, who are the Orange and Leather tribe, or the Karja, who are the Red Cloth tribe, and totally distinct from the Shadow Karja, who are the Red Cloth with Metal people. I could go on, but I really can't be bothered to look up the other clans, and I think I've made my point. While creating some cultural and aesthetic differences between tribes is a laudable goal, I honestly didn't see much beyond the broad strokes, and as such, I wasn't really compelled to care. Clearly, there was some effort put into making a distinction between the tribes, but not enough of one to really make me care about the differences. Aloy enters and exits these various tribes without comment from any of their members, and never experiences anything like the prejudice and ostracization she experienced in her own clan. So I wound up feeling like Aloy just came from a tribe of dicks. In the end, my only real concern was, will the game get pissy at me if I kill them? The answer? Not if they're Shadow Karja. Everyone else, hands off. And speaking of Aloy's outcast status, everyone around her refuses to tell her why she's an outcast, and it gets really awkward after a while. By the time she actually finds out why she's an outcast, it has long since passed the point where it seems reasonable to think that everyone around her would have held out. It's just weird that she's an adult and this is still a secret, and then when the secret is finally revealed, I was left wondering why I had to be kept in the dark so long. It was like, really? That's it? There's nothing else to this? Mostly, this game impressed me by defying my expectations. While it did fall into certain gaming tropes, there were a lot of them it shunned. I kept expecting various NPCs to become romantic interests or trusted friends to betray Aloy, but in the end, none of it happened. Except maybe once, but I'm not going to get into that. At this point, if Lance Reddick is in anything, it's a safe bet he's going to betray someone. Honestly, I'm just waiting for Zavala to start shooting up the last city. There were so many moments when gaming convention could have gone one way and this game chose to go the other. It constantly surprised me with its choices, and those moments when it was less than stellar weren't bad enough to hinder my enjoyment of the game as a whole. There were a number of amazing games this year, but this one had me from the beginning and never left me feeling like I was doing my best to slog through to the end. The plot, the characters, and the world itself kept me playing because I wanted to know more. I wanted to see this story through to the end. And it's for that reason that Horizon Zero Dawn is my game of the year. There are many other games that deserve an honorable mention, and they will be covered in the podcast, so be sure to check that out. In the meantime, tell me what you thought of Horizon Zero Dawn. Am I being too kind to it? Did I leave something out that really annoyed you? Did I let it off the hook in certain places? Let us know in the comments. Like and subscribe for more videos like this. Hit us up on Twitter at LootTheRoom, find us on Facebook, and as always, you can email us at loottheroompod@gmail.com. Thanks for listening, everyone. It's been a tough year, but it's almost over. Here's to a much better 2018, and as always, hunt the Wampus.